One final detail we need to model are these lines you see on the inside of this cutout that we made earlier. And how this was done was I took some edges out of that area and converted them to splines. And then using the sweep object and a circle, we created the geometry. So if I turn off the sweep object, we can just about see the spline on the inside there. And I can, of course, solo the spline by itself. And you see that was the basis of generating that geometry. So let's look at our new orb. And by the way, up to this point, I have been working away from the center of the scene, which is maybe not the best practice. It's not a big deal, but it's a good idea to just always work in the center of the scene. So I'm gonna shift that back and then put our reference preview to the side. So apologies for that. I should have mentioned this from the very beginning, and this is how it should have been. Anyway, let's continue. If we look at this geometry right now, we can see that that line needs to go somewhere in the center, right? But the thing is, there is no edge along the exact center of this cutout. Now we could just be kind of lazy and go with one of these other lines instead, but I thought it would be actually better to do it properly. It's also an excuse to show you guys a different modeling tool that we haven't looked at so far. So this tool is called the Loop Path Cut. And if I right click, here is the tool. And how this tool works is we can create cuts into the geometry, and as the name suggests, it's going to do this in a loop pattern. Now we have maintained this great edge flow when we have been building this orb, so it's going to be very simple and straightforward here. If I press the Shift key, some guides are going to come up, and then I can just click in the middle for the 50% guide, and we even get the slider up here to adjust where that cut is going to go. Now here is something else, which is I can reuse the cut because the first one was made at 50%. And I want to repeat this on all of these other sections. And you see now with reuse ticked, it's always going to snap to 50% of where you're trying to make the next cut. And it doesn't matter where this is, by the way. So it could be here, it could be there, anywhere we can make a loop cut. If we reuse it, it's going to be using the same proportions as the previous section. All right, so I'm just going through these one by one. So I have all of the cuts made. So now we have that segment which we can use to extract the center edge from. So if I get U and L for loop selection, and this is in edge mode, of course, we want to go ahead and select those new cuts. Now this is gonna take a minute. Okay, I think that's all of them. Now we can just go to Mesh, Conversion and Edge to Spline. And when I do this, a new child object will appear underneath our platonic, and it's this spline. And if I solo this spline, you see this is what we have. The edge to spline command used to be in a different location. I can't quite remember. I think it used to be under tools, and then there was like a mesh thing here, and then you got the conversion. But if you can't find it, go to customize commands and just search for it. So, edge to spline, place it somewhere in your interface temporarily, and then access it that way. And anyway, if you ever can't find any function I mentioned in the tutorial because you have a different version of Cinema 4D, you can try to find it using the customize commands section. So now that we have our splines, we want to generate the geometry. This is going to be done with a rectangle as the shape of the profile of this geometry. So let's set the width and height to 1 and 1. So just a very small rectangle in the center of the seam there. Of course, this is going to be used in conjunction with the sweep object. So from this menu, let's get the sweep, and I'm holding the Alt key with the rectangle, and then place the Platonic as a child of this also. So this is the hierarchy. The sweep object holds the two objects, and the profile shape is above the actual spline. It's hard to see a change in this gray color, so let's apply this neon material to that section, and now we see we have generated that part of the geometry. And the great thing about this is it follows the same edge flow, so it means that if I turn on subdivision surface again, it's going to line up perfectly and subdivide at the same areas. Now we can see the corners here don't look so good. The splines are not linking up. That's because in the spline itself, we should tick this switch, so close spline. Here is something else I noticed when I closed up the splines. So this is before closing them up, and let's re-enable subdiv surface. We see that disconnect, right? So if I close up the splines, you see it fixes that problem, but it also introduces this issue where the rectangle that makes up this geometry is being rotated in various places along this spline. So I don't know why that happens exactly, but in the sweep object, we can just go to the object settings, and let's switch off this banking here. This is one of the rotation modes. You could say, in coordinates, you have rotation heading, pitch, and banking. So for whatever reason, it's twisting the rectangle as it wraps it around the spline until we switch that off. There are cases where I guess you would want that kind of thing to happen, but definitely not here. But with that would be the end of how to create this sci-fi orb. So, we started with a Platonic object, made it editable, and then using various modeling tools, we crafted the different parts of the orb, extrude inner, extrude, beveling in all the right places, and so on. And then towards the end, we made some extra cuts to the geometry using the loop path cut tool, and converted those edges to some splines, and this is the final result. And because of the way we made this, the geometry inside of this subdivision object is very economical and clean, and we have a really good edge flow. So when we turn this on, everything gets smoothed out and curved in all the correct places. So anyway, that's it for this lesson.